Hi, my name is Amber and I am a counselor here in Havre, and I'm here today to talk a little bit with you about anxiety. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of anxiety. And how many of you think that you've had anxiety before or have been told that you've had anxiety before? Anxiety is really common, and in fact it's something that I work with even adults on. So I'd like for you to take out your worksheet and tell me what you know. Have you ever felt anxious? And in those columns, I want you to just take a couple of minutes and tell me, how did you feel in your body when you were anxious? So just write down a couple notes as you think about a time that you felt anxious. What did you notice? Did you have butterflies in your stomach? Did you have a hard time breathing? What did it feel like for you in your body as you were anxious? Next, I want you to think about what you were afraid of doing or what you avoided doing because you felt anxious. And go ahead and jot those things down in that middle box. And lastly, I want you to think about the thoughts in your head. So when you are anxious, what do you remember thinking about? I want you to write that down in that third box there. So next we're going to watch a little video on anxiety, and this is going to give you a little bit more information about how other people might experience it.
You know that scared or nervous feeling you get when you have to do something you're not sure you can do? Or go somewhere you've never been before? That feeling is called anxiety. And it can feel a bit different for each person, but it usually doesn't feel very nice. Maybe your palms get sweaty, or your body tenses up, or maybe you get a tummy ache. Maybe you've heard of anxiety, or maybe you haven't, but you've definitely felt it before. Because everyone feels it sometimes. It's normal. You want to know something really weird about anxiety? It's actually trying to help you. It's true. All those uncomfortable feelings, those happen because your brain thinks you're in danger, and it wants to protect you. When our muscles tense up and we sweat, it gets us ready to do a lot of exercise, which is helpful if you need to jump out of the way of a runaway train or wrestle a wolverine. Sometimes our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. That would be great if we needed to hide. Instead, we just feel stuck. When your brain does this, it's called fight, flight, or freeze. The problem is, sometimes your brain gets confused and it can't tell the difference between a charging moose and, say, going to a new school. Both things can be scary and cause anxiety, but there aren't any dangerous wild animals at a new school, hopefully. Understanding where anxiety comes from is the first step in learning to deal with it. So the next time you're in one of those tough situations and you start to feel those feelings, like butterflies in your stomach, or sweaty palms, or it gets hard to talk or move, remember, there's nothing wrong with your body. You're just having normal feelings of anxiety, and they're actually trying to help, even if they're not very good at it sometimes.
All right, so the next thing we're going to do is talk about the ABCs of anxiety. A is going to be the feelings, B is going to be the actions, and C is going to be the thoughts. So as we think about these things, I'd asked you to talk about on your paper what your feelings were. So these are some things that are common with anxiety. A lot of times we'll feel some pain in our chest, or we might feel sick to our stomach or feel like we've got butterflies. We might get dizzy or kind of feel lightheaded. You might notice that you get hot or feel like you're sweating. The video mentioned having sweaty palms. But you also might get cold or feel like you had the chills. Sometimes people talk about getting a lump in their throat, like they're just about ready to start crying. A lot of people feel a headache or some pressure in their head. Sometimes we feel like our heart is racing and it's pounding so hard that it feels like it's going to come right out of our chest. Sometimes people will notice that they're shaking, especially in places like their hands. And oftentimes it's difficult for us to breathe, or we feel like we're breathing really fast. Those are all really common feelings that we have in our bodies when we're having anxiety. So what about things that we do? What are our actions? So oftentimes when kids have anxiety, they don't want to read out loud. They don't want to make a mistake. Sometimes we're afraid to raise our hand or go to sleepovers. Sometimes it's really hard to sleep by ourselves. Might even find it hard to hang out with other kids. Sometimes we don't want to go to school. And oftentimes we don't want to do things when people will look at us. So playing sports or having a dance recital or a music recital where everybody's looking at us, that can really be hard when we're feeling some anxiety. How about our thoughts? So thoughts that come up often with anxiety are what ifs. So what if I fail my test? Or what if someone forgets to pick me up from school? What if I get it wrong and other kids in class laugh at me? What if I mess up and my whole team hates me? What if something bad happens? What if I forget what I'm supposed to do? All of these things can be part of anxiety. The thing to remember, though, is that anxiety is normal, and there's actually a reason why we have it. You might remember in the video it talked about fight, flight, and freeze. So sometimes our brains detect that there's an emergency, and our brain tells our body it needs to do something to protect us from that danger. So our muscles might tense up, or we start to sweat, and our body's preparing to do a lot of exercise to keep us out of danger. But other times our minds go blank and we feel like we can't move or talk. So when we're in a mode to fight, one of the examples in the video was that we are going to need to wrestle a wolverine. So you might not be wrestling a wolverine, but there might be times when your body responds in a way that it's fighting because it's getting anxious and it needs to protect us from something. Other times we might notice that there's a flight response, and that means like we're trying to get away or move away from something. The video talked about jumping out of the way of a runaway train, but this might be something different, like we're just moving away from the thing that we don't want to do. We have to go to the bathroom so that we don't get called on in class, those kinds of things. And the last thing is freezing. So sometimes our body just doesn't respond at all. Our mind goes blank, we feel like we can't talk or move. The video talked about needing to hide in a dangerous situation, but this can happen too. Like maybe your teacher calls on you and your mind just goes blank, you get anxious and you can't even think of the answer. All of these are really common, and it's exactly what our brain does. What I want you to think about is the anxiety is like a smoke detector. So we have smoke detectors. Most of you hopefully have them in your houses. And what do those do? When a smoke detector goes off, it alerts us that there might be an emergency, right? So they go off when there's smoke, thus the smoke detector. And when we see smoke, oftentimes there's fire, right? So when that smoke detector goes off and that loud noise alerts our attention, we stop what we're doing and we go and we check things out. It's an alarm. It tells us there might be danger. There might be an emergency here, right? But are smoke detectors always right? No. Sometimes smoke detectors go off and there is no emergency. There is no danger. There is no fire. Maybe I made some toast and the little crumbs started to make smoke and it made my smoke detector go off. There's no fire. There's no emergency, right? So sometimes the smoke detectors are going to go off and there's not an emergency. But we respond in different ways, right? So if there is an emergency, a fire, we might call 911, we might get a fire extinguisher, we might do something to help us get out of that emergency. But when there isn't a fire, we'll do something else. So maybe we open a window, in the case of my burnt toast, or maybe we just try to waft the smoke away. We know that it's not an emergency, so we respond in a different way. Anxiety detects an emergency like a smoke detector, but it isn't always right. So it's our job to stop, take a couple of breaths, observe the situation, and plan what we're going to do next. STOP. And this is what I want you guys to think about when you notice those things come up for you. So when those feelings come up in your body and you're starting to feel anxious, your heart is racing, it's hard for you to breathe, you have butterflies in your stomach, or maybe you're having those action responses like, oh, I don't want to raise my hand, or I don't want to go spend the night at their house, or I don't want to get in front of all these people and talk. Or if we're noticing those thoughts in our head, we're worried, like, what if this happens? What if everyone laughs at me? What if I'm wrong? So those are signals to us that we are experiencing some anxiety. And when we notice those things, it's our job, just like with the smoke detector, we're going to stop, take a few breaths, and observe the situation. Is this an emergency? Is there danger? And if there isn't, then we want to plan what to do next. If there is, of course, we're going to respond in a way that we would to an emergency. So next time I'm with you guys, we're going to talk about the plan what to do next. So we're going to actually learn some things that we can do when that anxiety is coming up for us and there is no emergency. What do we do with that? That can be kind of scary when your body's responding that way and you're thinking all of those things. So next time you join us, we'll be talking about some of those things. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for your attention today.